you so much. You make it. Oh, you guys, you make it easier to do this day after day. I love you so much. Wow. Well, it was 40 years ago, in September of 1979, that I began investigating worldwide bloodless animal mutilations. And to my great surprise then, it was law enforcement who told me the perpetrators were, quote, creatures from outer space. Now, 4 decades later, we have rovers exploring on Mars. We have spacecraft showing us the Pluto's icy mountains and the bright white magnesium salt deposits in the crater on dwarf planet Ceres, and news that at the bottom of the 30-mile deep ocean on Saturn's moon Enceladus, there is hot water at nearly 200 degrees Fahrenheit, gushing from the seafloor and spouting through the surface ice, apparently heated by radioactive material in the core. And that has provoked scientists to wonder if there are swimming creatures in that surprisingly warm moon water. And as the future rushes toward us with a persistent mixture of lies and truths, I would like to sharpen focus on what was happening 69 years ago when the front page of the Roswell Daily Record on July 8, 1947, was headlined, quote, Roswell Army Airfield captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region. No details of flying disc are revealed. We now know that during a thunderstorm late at night on July 3rd to 4th, 1947, 3 aerial objects merged on radar before 3 crash sites were found. The headline about one came from Colonel William Blanchard, commanding officer of the 509th Bomb Wing at the Roswell Army Airfield. Colonel Blanchard ordered his public information officer, Walter Halt, to issue a press release announcing that one of those flying saucer people had been reporting that summer that a UFO had crashed northwest of Roswell near Corona. Strange debris had been found by sheep rancher Mac Brazel on July 4th. 3 days later, on July 7th, the head of the Roswell Army Airfield's 509th Bomber Group, Lieutenant Colonel Jesse Marcel Sr., went to the Brazel Ranch with Counterintelligence Corps agent Sheridan Cavett to investigate and gather up peculiar silver foil that folded like cloth, plus long, thin I-beams with purple symbols on them. Next day, on July 8th, after the story broke on the front page of the Roswell Daily Record, the head of the 8th Air Force in Fort Worth, Texas, Brigadier General Roger Ramey, held a press conference with his chief of staff, Colonel Thomas DuBose, to falsely say, there was no flying saucer. It was just a weather balloon that exploded in the thunderstorm. And to strengthen his phony story, General Ramey had pieces of shredded weather balloon spread on the floor to be photographed so that newspapers would run with his concocted story, specifically to keep the public and the media from knowing about the alien presence. Even Lieutenant Colonel Jesse Marcel Sr. was asked to fly from Roswell, New Mexico to Fort Worth, Texas, to pose for photos amid weather balloon debris. But Colonel Marcel knew. He knew the truth. He knew that what he had gathered the day before from the Brazel Ranch was not a weather balloon. 5 years later, in 1952, President Truman's Majestic 12 special panel described in their first annual report about the retrieval of, quote, unidentified plan-form space vehicles, and stated, quote, Radar film and tower logs do not explain the merging, coming together in one blip of 3 radar targets prior to collision and subsequent crashes. There were 5 recovered bodies, and recovered is misspelled in the original report, 2 of which were found in a severely damaged escape cylinder, and the remaining 3 bodies were found some distance away from the cylinder. All 5 appeared to have suffered from sudden decompression and heat suffocation, and that word was also misspelled in the original transmission. So there were 3 radar targets and 3 crash sites. Landing Zone 1 was near Corona, about 75 miles northwest of Roswell. An interplanetary phenomenon unit summary on July 22nd, 1947, in paragraph 12 stated, quote, "The most disturbing aspect of this investigation was there were other bodies found not far from Landing Zone 1 that looked as if they had been dissected as you would a frog," close quote, without explaining whether the bodies were animal, human, or alien. Animal parts were reportedly discovered inside the craft at Landing Zone 2, and I will make a slight footnote here. I talked to a man back at least 30 years ago who lived in the Corona, New Mexico region. And he said that he knew somebody who had been in the military, and one of the best kept secrets was that they found body parts, at least human, or not human, but at least animal, in panels that they had to discover by getting inside the craft and pushing on the walls to see if anything would open. And that's how they discovered the body parts in sort of drawer panels. Landing Zone 2 was 20 miles southeast of Socorro, not far from Oscura Peak, which is the lowest right red circle, southeast of the Trinity site in White Sands Proving Ground, where the United States tested its first atomic bomb 2 years earlier in July of 1945. Landing Zone 2 is also where animal parts were reportedly found inside of a well-preserved capsule that might have been ejected from the crashed vehicle at Landing Zone 1 near Corona, with the idea that something crashed, but that an escape pod came out of it, went over the Oscura Peak, and came down at the Trinity site. Landing Zone 3 was 30 miles east of Alamogordo on the Mescalero Apache Indian Reservation. That third UFO had hit the ground hard and was badly damaged. The reference to plan form in the Majestic 12 Project's first annual report in 1952 meant a delta or crescent shape, like the heel of a shoe, which is the shape in this photograph taken over Phoenix, Arizona on July 7th, 1947, the same week as the Roswell crashes. So a photographer is photographing these planform-shaped UFOs in Phoenix the exact same week that 3 came down in Roswell, New Mexico, and a lot of people forget the timeline. It was only 1 week before July 4th, and that up in Washington, that Kenneth Arnold was seeing 9 planform-shaped objects going over the Cascade Mountains, and that is where his words, "It looked like flying saucers," have been picked up and quoted in newspapers around June 24th to 25th. The next week, 3 come down in Roswell, and a photographer is taking a photograph in Phoenix. The box camera was by William A. Rhodes, who had been a flight instructor during World War II at Falcons Field in Phoenix. And 2 days later, on Wednesday, July 9th, 1947, the Arizona Republic in Phoenix put the Rhodes photograph of the crescent-shaped aerial plan form on its front page, and they put it on upside down. This same plan form shape has been described and sketched by other retired military eyewitnesses of UFOs that had a very similar shape during this period of time. Not circular, not cylindrical, but these were all plan form shaped a bit like a shoe heel. General Ramey's goal was to carry out orders for a strict policy of denial and secrecy for the deeply concerned President Harry Truman. Allegedly, Truman and FDR had already dealt with a UFO and 3 dead aliens 6 years before that, and this is described in the 2016 book, MO41, Mo 41, and Mo has always been, for the residents who live there, their shorthand for Missouri. Mo 41, The Bombshell Before Roswell, by author Paul Blake Smith. And he writes that on the night of April 12, 1941, full 6 years before Roswell, Washington, and Phoenix, a crescent-shaped UFO crashed near Cape Girardeau, Missouri. Cape Girardeau is 115 miles southeast of St. Louis. Sikeston is 35 miles south of Cape Girardeau. The Missouri Institute for Aeronautics in Sikeston allegedly retrieved a crescent-shaped craft and 3 identical small bodies that were described as, quote, not from this world, close quote, in a farm country about 8 miles south of Cape Girardeau. They were autopsied, and the report was kept very secret. Nobody knew about these bodies. But here's the fact. Truman, FDR, that whole government body, George Marshall, Secretary of War, when they got the report, it said that the 3 bodies were identical clones. And if the men running the government in 1941 were told that 3 bodies taken from a craft from outer space were clones, their first question would have been, then where are the makers of those clones? And that would have been the beginning of the United States government running scared and not wanting everybody to know. And my own conviction is, if they had announced to the United States and the world what had been found then, we might never have even had World War II. One MJ-12 document leaked in the 1990s to aerospace engineer Dr. Bob Wood is entitled MJ-12 Project, White Hot Intelligence Estimate Preliminary, dated September 19th, 1947. This is after the whole Roswell and Phoenix region. And it says, classified magic eyes only, Part 3, Scientific Probabilities. And it says, quote, based on all available evidence collected from recovered exhibits, the plan form UFOs currently under study by, and it then lists 11 government and military agencies, including Massachusetts Institute of Technology. All of the best minds in the United States were immediately brought into this, even though we've had 70 years of denial. The truth is, the very best minds, the leading aerospace, all of them were immediately brought in to investigating what they had retrieved from Roswell. And I know that the craft that went down in Missouri was taken to Washington, D.C. and put in an underground installation. And in this document, it says about the Roswell region craft. These craft are deemed extraterrestrial in nature. Those were conclusions all the way back in 47 in these secret documents that were not released in some fashion in the 90s. This conclusion was reached as a result of comparisons of artifacts, get this, comparison of artifacts from the Missouri discovery in 1941. So the documents that no one in the world knew, that we had scientists, we had our leading aerospace corporations, they already had all this knowledge in 1941 from Missouri. They now have a series of crashes and sightings and photographs 6 years later in 47. They already had studied. They're now seeing confirmation of exactly the same kind of technology, cloned bodies. And they said, the technology is outside the scope of U.S. science. This is what they're saying to each other. It is even outside that of German rocket and aircraft development, close quote. Part 2, technical evaluation, paragraph 18 states, quote, the following elements were analyzed and found to exist in the small neutronic power plant that was found inside of U-Lot 1. This was another acronym they were using in the 40s for UFO planform, and this stands for unidentified, lenticular-shaped, that is this shape, lenticular-shaped aerodyne, U-Lot. Even the recovery case of 1941, again referring to Cape Girardeau, Missouri, did not create a unified intelligence effort to exploit possible technological gains, with the exception of the Manhattan Project, close quote. Now, the reference to the Manhattan Project means physicist Robert Oppenheimer had the Cape Girardeau neutronic power plant to study during his development of the atomic bomb first dropped on Japan in August 1945 that ended World War II. So what this means is that Robert Oppenheimer in Los Alamos, New Mexico, in our country's greatest secret development of the atomic bomb, had hand-delivered to him the neutronic power plant from the Cape Girardeau, Missouri crash and 3 clone bodies. And he had it right at the beginning of his development in the early 1940s. This also implies that Presidents Roosevelt and Truman already knew about the alien presence during World War II before all of these crashes in Roswell. And they had made a decision to keep everything secret about UFOs and ETs that they had retrieved, both dead and alive. Much of the content in those early reports was drawn from what Lieutenant General Nathan Twining discovered in his secret mission for President Truman soon after the New Mexico crashes. That's when General Twining viewed 5 alien bodies and a craft found at Landing Zone 2 near Oscura Peak and the Trinity site on the White Sands Proving Ground. In 1947, General Twining was commander of the Air Materiel Command, and 10 years later, President Eisenhower would appoint him chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He had all of this knowledge when he became the chief. By July 16, 1947, only 1 week after the Roswell Daily headline, 1 week, General Twining sent President Truman a 2-page report about what he himself saw at the Landing Zone 2 crash site near Oscura Peak on the White Sands Proving Ground. Quote, upon examination of the interior of the craft, a compartment exhibiting a possible atomic engine was discovered. In the power room was a donut-shaped tube approximately 35 feet in diameter, made of what appears to be a plastic material that is surrounding a central core. This tube was translucent, approximately 1 inch thick. There are misspellings in these documents, and these are the original documents. The tube appeared to be filled with a clear substance, possibly a heavy water. This activation of electrical potential is believed to be the primary power to the reactor, though it is only a theory at present. Just how a heavy water reactor functions in this environment is unknown. On the deck of the power room, there are what resembles typewriter keys, possibly reactor power plant controls. There were no conventional electronics, nor wiring to be seen connecting these controls to the propulsion turret. Now, I have been told that those keys had very strange hieroglyphs, kind of symbols, on them. And the 1952 MJ-12 first annual report said, quote, "The technology may be eons ahead of us, meaning thousands of years beyond us on Earth." Another military insider from World War II and the Eisenhower and Kennedy presidencies did a 1997 book entitled The Day After Roswell about what he knew firsthand of UFO, extraterrestrial technologies, and ETs while working in the Pentagon. Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso worked as chief of the Pentagon's Foreign Technology Desk for General Arthur Trudeau, who was handpicked by President Dwight Eisenhower in 1958 to be Director of Army Research and Development in the Pentagon. General Trudeau, on the right, handpicked Colonel Corso after their trusted days together in World War II. Colonel Corso told me that he met with General Trudeau in his Pentagon office, where the general went over to a brown filing cabinet that was next to a second brown filing cabinet, opened one of the doors, reached in. Colonel Corso was standing there. He could see all kinds of things in the file drawer. And the general said, "This is all has been retrieved from UFO crashes." The general asked Colonel Corso to secretly hand-deliver ET artifacts to selected contacts in a few American corporations. General Trudeau and President Eisenhower wanted the ET technologies back-engineered and patented inside of U.S. corporations as a top-secret national security priority. No one in Congress, no one in the Supreme Court, none of the tax-paying American public was to know anything. General Trudeau and Colonel Corso were the beginning of the United States' serious efforts to develop a secret space program that would use retrieved extraterrestrial technology for advancement in the United States. Meanwhile, NASA, under CIA control, always has been under CIA control, especially when they were saying it was a public agency. It's never been a public agency. It has always been controlled by the CIA. And that NASA would be the public camouflage for what was behind the scenes, a dark and growing underbelly of America spending billions and later trillions of secret dollars, but unknown and untouchable. In June 1997, Time magazine did a cover story on the 50th anniversary of the Roswell crashes, and I was there to speak for that 50th commemoration. And there I met and talked with Colonel Corso about his work for General Trudeau. When Colonel Corso was introduced to me, he extended his hand to shake mine, and he said, "Linda, how the hell did you get so much classified information?" That's the way I felt, too. The guys in the military and the White House, they've always underestimated the human abduction syndrome as a personal handshake with real aliens. And then they come to me. He meant, at that moment, the animal mutilations that I had investigated for my TV documentary, A Strange Harvest, that was first broadcast May 28, 1980, on Denver's CBS station, KMGH-TV, where I was director of special projects. That's when sheriffs and ranchers told me the perpetrators of the bloodless, trackless animal deaths were, quote, creatures from outer space, close quote. Ranchers had seen glowing lights and night skies emit beams down into their pastures. A few had even seen a cow lifted up inside a beam of light or lowered down to a pasture, dead and mutilated. No blood, no tracks. But none of those eyewitnesses would stand in front of my TV camera because they were so afraid of ridicule from their fellow humans. Before he died, Colonel Corso talked to me in private about the highly classified documents that he had read in Washington, D.C., dated as early as 1951 in the Pentagon, about animals found in several parts of the world with bloodless excisions and no tracks around them. Colonel Corso said the classified reports that he read specified that the perpetrators of animal mutilations were extraterrestrial biological entities, but why? This illustration is by a Missouri horse rancher in 1975 who saw this glowing being at his gate during a time when he found several newborn foals and young horses bloodlessly mutilated in his pasture. Eventually, our government would realize that many of the UFO so-called pilots and other non-human entities were actually cloned androids, exactly like what had been confirmed in 1941 from the 3 bodies in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. And there were not only clones, they began to realize that they were also dealing with biological androids or human ETs, humanoid-looking ETs, but it was becoming clear that whoever the prime intelligence that was making the clones and the androids were not what we were dealing with. That's what the government wanted to meet. And that these hybrids and the androids, the suspicion was they were being produced from genetic harvests from the Earth life, animals and humans. So animals were one side of the genetic harvest picture, and human eggs and sperm were the other side of the genetic harvest. Our government, according to Colonel Corso, learned that in spite of the mutilations and abductions, some ETs are friendly, and they want humanity to advance faster, to be more protected from unfriendly ETs. So there was urgency in General Trudeau's goal to get alien technologies back engineered and patented as fast as possible, to keep them from Germany and Russia, and to support a secret space program that might have to do battle in real Star Wars. About secret ET technology transfer to American corporations for back engineering and patents, Colonel Corso wrote in his book, The Day After Roswell, quote, General Trudeau also had relationships with the Army contractors who were developing new weapon systems for the military within one part of the company, while another part was harvesting some of the same ET technology for consumer product development. These companies were Bell Labs, IBM, Monsanto, Dow, RCA, that became General Electric, and the aviation and medical companies of Howard Hughes, close quote. At that July 1997 50th anniversary conference, Dr. Jesse Marcel Jr. handed me this replica of the thin I-beam that he remembered holding in the first week of July 1947. That is when his father, Jesse Marcel Sr., the head of intelligence at the Roswell Army Airfield, woke up Jesse and his mother to show them pieces of the strange silver foil and I-beams that Jesse Marcel Sr. had picked up at one of the 3 UFO crash sites that first week of July of 1947, the one between Roswell and Corona. Jesse Marcel Sr. said, the metallic foil was like cloth. It felt like cloth, and they could do this. They would fold the cloth up in their hands. They would unfold it. It would be as absolutely as pure, flat. They would crumple it and put it on a table. It would go back. Jesse Jr. told me that his father said that night when the father came home and showed his mom and him, this debris, quote, was not of this earth, close quote. And that was from being an intelligence officer talking with other intelligence officers in July of 47. Young Jesse Marcel was most curious about what he described as metallic pinkish purple hieroglyphs or symbols that ran along the entire length of a tan-colored I-beam that was only 3/8 of an inch wide. They measured it. The I-beam was so lightweight that Jesse Jr. said that when it was in his hand, he could barely feel. It was like air. Plastics did not exist publicly in 1947. But eyewitnesses would later on compare the I-beams to new lightweight plastic or what would be something like balsa wood. There were rumors that scientists had discovered the I-beams were an exotic hybrid of metal like wood. It would not cut and it would not burn. Intelligence officer Jesse Marcel Sr. would himself compare the strange pink-purple symbols to, quote, indecipherable Chinese writing, close quote. 12 years after the 1947 Roswell UFO cover-up began, Brigadier General Stephen Lufkin has said that he was briefed at the Pentagon in 1959 about the Roswell UFO crashes. He was shown thin I-beams with what he called purplish encryptions, and that means encoding messages or information in such a way that only authorized parties can read it, and that implies that the aliens themselves were doing some kind of encryption of symbols as our government, were trying to understand what was on these I-beams. Another source, Steve Lytle, reported that his mathematician father was asked by government authorities to decipher the I-beam symbols, but no one ever was able to. And those were not the only mysterious symbols to show up on UFOs. In 1803, the very beginning of the 19th century, on the east coast of Japan in the Hitachi province, fishermen reported that a pale, red-headed, alien-looking woman suddenly emerged from under the ocean waters in a round craft that had symbols on its surface. The woman was inside the craft, clutching a box. Eyewitnesses called her Utsuro Bune, meaning ship hole, because her sea craft was shaped like a rice bowl. People who saw the craft said the top was like glass or crystal. You could see through it. When the red-haired woman spoke, it was in a language that no Japanese person had ever heard before. What language was she speaking? Where did she come from? What was in the box? Nobody knows. Eyewitnesses claim the same red-haired woman and craft were reported in other parts of Japan as if she were flying around in the craft. She was always reported to be tightly holding the box. 177 years later, on December 26, 1980, after midnight, Staff Sergeant James Peniston at RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge in England would also encounter a strange craft with symbols in Rendlesham Forest. When Sergeant Peniston dragged his fingers over the symbols, his mind was filled with zeros and ones of binary code and telepathic impressions of a time machine from a distant future where an advanced civilization was dying out. Its mission was to harvest genetic material from Earth to use as Band-Aids to extend the future civilization's survival. There was no pilot. The triangular craft in Rendlesham Forest was operated with alien self-activating software. Now here is a comparison of two Utsuro Bune symbols marked with red on the right, and those circles that are variations on the Jim Peniston triangle and circle symbols in the lower left. We are going to see this triangle circle symbol again in a 2015 UFO encounter in the United States. But first, on August 28, 1991, 11 years after Sergeant Peniston touched the symbols on the alien craft in Rendlesham Forest, Soviet authorities were tracking a UFO on a zigzag course at 4,225 miles an hour. The rapid radar track vanished over Kyrgyzstan. 1 year later, in June of 1992, finally, a search party got to where a cylinder-shaped craft with strange green symbols were on it. The investigators reported a, quote, powerful electromagnetic field emanating from the wreckage, close quote. All photographs and videotape recordings were overexposed. They were ruined. The craft had crashed in the Shaitan Mazar Gorge, also known as the Devil's Grave, in the central Tian Shan Mountains of eastern Kyrgyzstan, and clearly they were releasing some kind of radiation that was fogging all the photographs and affected the magnetic tapes. And then 14 years after that, in late June 2015, an Army sergeant with his wife, 2 young children, dog, and cat began moving from Hunter Army Airfield near Richmond Hill, Georgia, and the Atlantic Ocean to Fort Carson in Colorado Springs, planning to go through Atlanta, Georgia on the way. The sergeant set his truck's GPS for the route, and they planned to travel at night when it was cooler, with less traffic, and stay in motels during the day. The husband, that I call Sergeant CJ, and his wife were shocked when a bright white light in the sky suddenly came straight down toward their truck. The Army sergeant estimated that the disc hovering above their truck was 820 feet long. That's nearly 3 football fields and nearly 200 feet high. Bright white sparks projected out beyond the craft, front and back. Below the midline, there was a row of 5 dark-colored symbols, and he told me, quote, "In the Army, I'm a trained observer. I've been doing this for 15 years. I'm able to identify high-velocity rounds, as well as mortars, rockets, artillery, aircraft of all types. I'm trained to do that for whatever comes down in front of us on military missions. This huge craft was beyond anything I had ever been trained for," close quote. Sergeant CJ's wife remembered the UFO surface glistened like an oil slick of rainbow colors when it tilted toward them in the truck. She also thought that there were round lights around the perimeter. This encounter was from 1:25 to 1:29 a.m. in those 4 minutes on the early morning of June 29th, 2015. And this was according to Sergeant CJ's digital watch that he looked at on his wrist when the craft disappeared by blinking right out in front of him. He said, 820 feet diameter craft. I've never seen anything so large, and I am studying it, and it disappeared as if I had shut off a light. The couple felt confused and disoriented. Sergeant CJ said he drove up the road a few miles in tremendous confusion and found a Shake Rag Express on Highway 1 South. When he tried to get out of the truck, he said that his legs felt like wet noodles, and he realized he was about to collapse onto the asphalt parking lot, and he grabbed a hold of the door to keep himself standing. But the greater shock to him, as he stumbled, his wife told me he looked like he was drunk as he tried to make his way into this store. He said the Shake Rag Express receipt that he got for the water and some of the food he got for his kids and his wife showed that they were in Wadley, Georgia, way off the GPS course to Atlanta and on to Colorado. The couple had no idea how they were diverted north without realizing it from their GPS program route that should have taken only 4.5 hours for the 250-mile drive from Richmond Hill, Georgia, via Route 16 to Route 75 right into Atlanta. But what happened next implies that the diversion on Route 1 north to the rural countryside of Wadley, Georgia, was under the control of an alien intelligence capable of manipulating the minds of both Sergeant CJ and his wife in order to transmit binary information directly into Sergeant CJ's mind. First, let's compare the June 29th, 2015 Wadley craft symbols with the December 26, 1980 Rendlesham Forest incident. The far left symbol on the Wadley, Georgia disc seems to match the far left bottom symbol that Staff Sergeant James Peniston sketched. After touching those raised symbols on the black, glassy, triangular craft in Rendlesham Forest, near RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge Air Force Base on December 26, 1980. Also, Sergeant Peniston's ring around the triangle with the 2 black circles resembles the second symbol from the right on the Wadley disc that has a ring around a triangle with 3 circles, similar to Sergeant Peniston's ring triangle with 2 circles. Sergeant CJ and his wife were so confused about what had happened as CJ continued driving northwest, and they were arguing with each other about what really had transpired right in front of them. And as they drove northwest to Atlanta, again now on a different road, they finally checked into the Magnuson Hotel in Kennesaw, north of Atlanta, at 7:36 a.m. on June 29, 2015. They slept in the day, and then they got back on the road, headed for Kentucky. The credit card sales receipt for the Motel 6 in Paducah, Kentucky, shows that CJ and his family checked in at 5:13 a.m. on June 30th, 2015. Exhausted, everyone fell asleep. But Sergeant CJ found himself waking up in their Motel 6 bathroom, holding a ballpoint pen in one hand. He said he found himself, he opened his eyes out of sound sleep like this, propped up in the door. In his right hand is a ballpoint pen, and in the left is this. He's looking at the back of their receipt, covered with what he said What are all of these squares and these lines, and what the, as he trailed off, WTF, am I doing with this ballpoint pen in my hand? Now, what you are about to hear, at his request, more distortion for these whistleblowers that we're in this time when everybody can be punished so badly for simply telling the truth about what they encounter, what their missions are in relationship to alien intelligences on this planet that our government has known intimately about since 1941. Sergeant CJ asked me to voice Alter as Spartan 1 and 2 asked me to voice Alter. And what you are going to hear comes from a vivid dream that he had before becoming conscious in the bathroom. In the dream, light gray-colored alien beings wearing dark lenses over eyes similar to but larger than human eyes are warning Sergeant CJ about a threat to Earth. Well, there should be sound. Gosh, I don't know. We went through. I don't know what's happened. Well, I'll go. I have the transcript, so I'll tell you. I said to him, have you seen the symbols in sleep or your mind's eye? Sergeant CJ, well, usually in my sleep, and the first time that it happened was in that Motel 6 in Paducah, Kentucky. I do not remember getting out of bed and walking into the bathroom with a pen and my hotel receipt and doing this writing of these squares and lines. I literally woke up standing there after I had finished writing. Well, have the symbols been repeated in addition to the squares and the vertical lines? Yeah, I've seen them in a dream. And he goes on and says, it was dark all the way around, and the squares and lines are being scrolled past in his mind's eye from his right to left. They are slightly illuminated, like with a light blue color. And I said, well, are you getting any impression of what they are saying in your dream? Something, I don't know. It may be that I have no idea. It's
in your video itself?
yeah, and I should see that little audio bubble, and it's not there. I have no idea.
Did you try backing up or sliding?
Yeah. I get, at least I've got the script.
Okay.
So, but thank you. He said that these beings, he drew this. He said this is what was vivid in the dream before he woke up in the bathroom. And he said they transmitted into his mind about themselves and called themselves the Council of Five. And he said, they're warning me in preparation for something, an alert of what may come or what could come or what is soon to come or something to that effect. And they, the Council of Five aliens, are doing what they can to try to help us humans. They are almost to the point where they are outnumbered, and we are going to need to help them help us and get to where we need to be as humans in order to be able to stand a chance of survival. Did you see any humanoids of any shape or size? And he says yes, and now he is describing them to me. Their skin looks similar to ours, but the color is different. It's gray. Elongated heads, larger sockets for eyes, large eyes. In the dream that I was seeing, there was one about where my feet would be, and I could see expressions on its face. It's the one in the upper top, as if with a bit of worry, but it was trying to keep me calm. And then I asked him, did you get any telepathic impressions of warning that there aren't enough of us? There is more of them. Something is going to happen, that this is going to be a big problem, and these beings have been trying to help. And now they can because they don't have enough numbers versus what the enemy might have against them. And he said, well, I think it's more along the lines that what we humans are doing that's going to harm us, such as sending signals out into space, this is not a safe thing to do. That we have technology that we need to expand on, but it is being kept from everyone behind locked doors, closed doors, and only given to certain individuals or something to that effect, and allow all minds. These beings want all human minds on earth to come together to get things done more quickly. Okay, what is going to happen? Whatever it is that's going to happen might negatively affect us. I don't know what that might be. And I say, and if there is a warning or an alert that would imply that something is coming that may be harmful, I'm not sure. I know it is something that will affect us here on earth. I know that our current advancement and technology and how we're progressing is happening too slowly. And the way to fix that is opening up and allowing everyone here on earth who has been kept in the dark or not being told this information. We need to allow all of our minds to know what the governments know in order to solve the issues that we're having to increase our advancement in technology and speed up our process for advancement. And I said, if that doesn't happen, what do you think could happen? He said, I don't have an answer for that, but I have talked with him many times since that interview, and he still thinks there is great concern about something that is coming back or is going to show up, and that these are the beings that he thinks are some that are trying to help us, and they are worried that we are behind in the timeline of getting to a point where we could defend ourselves against whatever is hostile, and that part of the reason is that what the ETs either purposely placed in Roswell and Missouri, like Trojan horse to help us as crashes, that because it has been so compartmentalized, so secret, so underground, that we're not at the point in humanity with the technology we would have had if it would have been shared with all the minds on our planet. It's exactly what we've been talking about everywhere at Contact. About the Council of Five, Sergeant CJ told me he had never heard about this ever before, this dream, before he woke up with his eyes holding the binary code in the pen. And when you Google ET or Alien Council of Five, this is one of the websites that comes up that lists 5 alleged alien races that include the word Emerther, E-M-E-R-T-H-E-R. This was the very first time in my professional career that I had ever heard of Emerther in the process of trying to investigate Sergeant CJ's words that he did not understand. We're all in the dark. The website Alien Axioms describes the Emerther as, quote, one of the founder races of the Council of Five. I believe him. He never heard of Council of Five. He never knew anything. And yet, the telepathy that he had shared and had written down in a notebook, he had notebooks that backed up a lot of what he was saying, you find in a website that I have no idea. I tried to find who was behind this website. One of the founder races of the Council of Five, ancient and more advanced on many levels than most cosmic intelligences. Allegedly, it was the emerther that wanted to meet with or did meet with American President Dwight Eisenhower. Not a Nordic, not a blonde, not a reptilian, but with one of these. And that perhaps because, and this is, I've heard this so many times, I can't help but think that there's truth here. Perhaps because the emerthers wanted atomic bomb testing stopped. Because we were tearing into other dimensions that we did not even know existed. The website states, without giving information sources, quote, very little is known about the 5 alien races that make up the Council of Five. These 5 races have been trying to protect Earth and humans for a long time. And they last met together on planet Earth in 1944. That would be 1 year before we dropped the bombs and World War II ended. I asked Sergeant CJ why he thought advanced intelligences would be communicating with Earth humans in binary code. He replied, quote, well, maybe it's like the yin and yang symbol of black and white. So zeros, ones, they can be used all over the universe to communicate. On Earth, this is what standard ASCII 8-bit binary code looks like. It starts with the number 0, which is equivalent to the 8 characters 0011, 0000. Capital letters are different from lowercase letters, so you have punctuation as well, such as periods and commas. And each and every character has to have their own 8-bit code designators. Australian geneticist Horace Drew, PhD, volunteered to translate Sergeant CJ's squares and ones. Here is the first page where red underlining shows how letters and words emerge from ASCII binary code. And here it is translated, and remember that capital C has its own series of zeros and ones. The uncapitalized O is a different number. Every letter, N, T, I, N, O, U, S, all of each letter has its set of zeros and ones behind it. And so this is how that page that he saw in the doorway in the motel began to be translated. Continuous protection of humanity, 49.27 north, 11.5 east, expose hidden knowledge to all. Hold on. I had same question. To all citizens, advancement imperative for planetary survival. Beware of Orion 1350.3 and Zeta Reticuli 39.1, question mark of the zeros and ones in between, 70. Avoid signal messages sent, meaning sending messages out into space. And here is the whole translation for all of the squares and lines that Sergeant CJ wrote on the back of his Motel 6 letter-size receipt in Paducah, Kentucky. And I'll just reinforce continuous protection of humanity at that latitude and longitude, expose hidden knowledge to all citizens, advancement imperative for planetary survival, beware like giving an outer space latitude, longitude concerning Orion and Zeta Reticuli, and avoid sending messages out into space. Now, Horace Drew, who did the binary translation, said to me, quote, "Those two coded numbers, 1350.3 and 39.1 ? 70, he said, that would appear to be the light year distance from Earth. The Orion Nebula is 1,350 light years from Earth. The binary star system of Zeta Reticuli is 39.17 light years from Earth. Further, Zeta Reticuli 1 is supposed to be the original solar system source of the gray aliens, going back to Betty and Barney Hill, 1961, the abduction in New Hampshire, their car stopped, taken by gray aliens into a craft, and Betty was shown a star map. It said Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 was identified by those grays in 1961 in New Hampshire as where they came from. And here are numbers that match astronomical logs that show the distances from Earth to, in this case, Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 in the Orion Nebula. Now, the final line, avoid signal messages sent, seems to relate to Sergeant CJ's dream information about the danger for Earth when we send out SETI signals or any other signals without knowing who is on the other end. That same warning came in 2015 from Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and physicist Stephen Hawking that we should not send lots of radio signals into space that would be picked up by some alien intelligence that could be hostile. Now let's go back to that first line and your question and my question that says, continuous protection of humanity, 49 degrees, 27 minutes north, and 11 degrees, 5 minutes east. If that latitude and longitude are supposed to be a location on Earth where ETs from the Council of Five are protecting humans, how odd that it turns out to be town center of Nuremberg, Germany. Nuremberg was a significant city for the Nazis in World War II, and it was the location of the international war crime trials after the war ended. But Nuremberg was also famous more than 400 years ago, in 1561, when immense black cylinders appeared in an early dawn sky and released many strange, smaller blue, black, red, and orange spheres, rods, and crosses. Many people watched the aerial machines clash in battle above a great black spear that remained stationary for the hour-long conflict. Some UFOs crashed and burned in the lower right of this famous woodcut by German artist Hans Glaser. So who, in that aerial UFO battle, might have been protecting humanity, as stated in the Sergeant CJ binary code, quote, continuous protection of humanity at this latitude and longitude? And what could the battle be about? Let's go deeper into binary code messages by comparing Sergeant CJ's string of zeros and ones to Sergeant Jim Peniston's back on December 26, 1980. That was the night that Sergeant Peniston, with Airman First Class John Burroughs and Airman Ed Kovansak, were ordered into Rendlesham Forest to investigate strange colored lights moving around in the tall forest on civilian land that ran along RAF Bentwaters Woodbridge, then NATO's largest airbase. This is page 1 of the binary code written down by Sergeant Peniston after he touched the raised symbols on the surface of a mysterious black, glassy, triangular craft on the ground. The red lines mark off the groups of 8 zeros and ones to match against the ASCII code translation for letters and numbers. At the right is the summary translation of each line. Exploration of humanity, and then unclear numbers, and then the number 8100. Page 2, Peniston's binary code. It goes latitude and longitude, and then in all caps the word continuous. Page 3, all caps, 4 planetary advance. Page 4, all caps. 4th, coordinate continuous question mark, CEPR question mark. That's when the binary code behind each letter or symbol or punctuation can be puzzling to the translator. And then the word before. After the word before, on page 5, Peniston's writing stops. So let's look at it whole. Exploration of humanity, 666, 8100. Then a latitude and longitude, which ancient aliens had a binary code translator. They had the same options that I had because I was working with an astronomer and other people on my own. But ancient aliens decided to go with one of the options of High Brazil, which is off in the ocean off the coast of Europe. I'll get into what my group found in just a moment, and explain why it's not certain when you deal with latitudes and longitudes that you need specific information that would help guide in binary code, because you can have a lot of options on latitudes and longitudes. The next line, continuous for planetary they assume advancement. 4th coordinate, continue before, and then. Here are Peniston's translations of his own lists of latitudes and longitudes, which were in other pages. That they're talking about coordinates on this planet that relate, as we have all begun to discuss, portals that transport alien intelligences in and out of Earth. Caracol, Belize, Sedona, Arizona, the Great Pyramid in Giza, Egypt, the Nazca Lines in Peru, Taichung in China, the portal at the Temple of Apollo in Naxos, Greece, and then these words, eyes of your eyes. There's been a lot of discussion about this. Peniston did not really understand this. It could be that what they mean is we have the ability to look through your eyes. Origin, another latitude, longitude repeat of the first line, described here as High Brazil because that's what ancient aliens went with. And then origin year, 8100. Now this is Jim Peniston's personally approved and official release of his binary code translations. And on that last line, origin year 8100, if you subtract Earth year 1980, when they were in R.A. Bentwaters, from 8100, you get 6,120 years in the future for the time travelers. And this is interesting if that is what this meant, because Jim Peniston from military hypnosis remembered that under hypnosis with military handlers, he thought that the telepathic download that he was getting in the forest that night was coming from beings that were saying they were 40,000 years in our future. Nobody can reconcile or understand these differences. But some people have said it can also be argued that time travelers from a distant future were not referring in terms of time coordinates to Earth-based 365-day year cycles of time here. It may have been a completely different reference to another location in the cosmos. It is also important to understand that Peniston did not have any decimal placements in his string of zeros and ones. So each latitude and longitude could be as many as 24 possibilities. And that's why High Brazil is one. But for the people that I was working with, including an astronomer, when they did analysis of the latitude, longitude, they thought, and the scientist was he felt strongly about this, that latitude, longitude was not High Brazil, that it was the town center of Woodbridge, which is the town where R.E.F. Bentwater's Woodbridge and Rendlesham Forest are located. And the argument was that if something was coming here and was on exploration, that it would have been pulsing constantly information about where it was on Earth, and that it would come out in a binary code would mean that Woodbridge Town Center would make more sense as a relationship of that craft in Rendlesham Forest than out hundreds of miles to the Atlantic and the High Brazil option. Now let's compare Sergeant CJ's first June 30th, 2016 binary translation on the top here to 35 years later, after Sergeant Peniston's binary. And what we're looking at is the upper one is continuous protection of humanity. That's Sergeant CJ. And below is Peniston. And look at where you get this exploration of humanity, unclear 8100, the advancement imperative for planetary survival, for planetary, and we know that that probably was advancement, that something is exploring, and the two have similar words. And so there is a sense that in 1980 and in 2015, that something in two military minds was trying to telepath binary code that was translating perhaps a similar message. Now, both of them, I know Peniston thought that they were worried that we weren't advancing fast enough to deal with what is out in the universe. Sergeant CJ definitely thinks we are not advancing fast enough because of all of the compartmentalization of the technology that ETs have given us. Now, another warning about planetary survival came in this binary code discovered in a wheat field next to Crabwood Copse in the village of Pitt near Winchester, Hampshire, England, on August 15, 2002. The gray alien head and binary code disk are in front of BBC Winchester's tall broadcast antenna. The 60 thin horizontal lines are thought to simulate an early 20th century TV broadcast. Probably some of you here are old enough to remember when the first TV came out, they always had all of these lines. Okay, so this is like a simulation that is an echo of the beginning of the 20th century, not a timeline now. The implication seemed to be that the crop formation was a reply to Earth TV signals. But was the warning from the alien depicted in the wheat holding the binary disk, or was the warning about the alien in this wheat pattern? The 3 star-like objects on the alien shoulder resemble the famous Orion belt stars. I remember Orion was in Sergeant CJ's binary code. So many people think that there is a threat from something associated with the Orion constellation. Now, just briefly to show you how binary code is extracted from a crop formation. Right at the beginning, see where it is 0100, 0010, and that equals the capital letter B in the ASCII code. And the entire ASCII 8-bit translation of the Crabwood spiral binary code is: beware the bearers of false gifts and their broken promises. Much pain, but still time. Believe there is good out there. We oppose deception, conduit closing. I think all of us in this room would agree with this message, that deception and secrets and lies have hurt this planet more than they have helped. Yeah. A similar message was repeated 13 years later on June 23rd, 2015, the same year that Sergeant CJ and his wife, kids, and their cats and dogs were abducted from that highway and ended up in Wadley, Georgia, instead of Atlanta. This is June 23rd, 2015, near the airport of Turin, Italy, also known as Torino. This city is where Jesus Christ's alleged burial shroud is kept. Geneticist Horace Drew from Sydney, Australia, tackled these very difficult rings of binary code that included 128 small circles in straight lines between 16 triangular rays of the outermost ring. His binary translation of that outer ring is Timeo et ferentes. That translates in Italian, beware et bearing gifts. Horace Drew said the Torino, Italy, June 23rd, 2015 summer solstice wheat pattern, quote, it looks like a clock where we have 2 rotating inner wheels to match the outer wheel, close quote. Even though the inner ring binary code is not clear, Dr. Drew thinks some of it warns about a Trojan horse event coming to Earth. He wonders if the Trojan horse is an invasion attack by the gray ETs from Orion and Zeta Reticuli that have been warned about in Sergeant CJ's binary code. And keep these timelines in mind. Torino, 7 days later, June 30th, 2015, Sergeant CJ's binary, 1 week apart. Sergeant CJ did receive more telepathic downloads coming into his head at night. He said the squares and lines came faster than before, so it was hard for him to write it all down. He also could see that some of the squares were darkened, and he managed to get some of the new communication written down, along with his comments about what was happening. From October 27th to the first week of January of 2016, Sergeant CJ was waking up a lot, and he was yelling. I talked with his wife, and she said he would wake her up talking loudly and was often saying a string of numbers, zeros and ones, zeros and ones. She told me in near tears how much it scared her, and she wanted it to stop. Sergeant CJ said he was trying to concentrate on the dark shadings in the squares that he had not been able to copy before because the images moved too fast in his mind's eye, also like Peniston, from right to left, going across in front of him. But finally, he thought he was getting some of it in these new pages. Horace Drew in Australia researched binary codes and found that there is one, this one at thinkersmith.org, that uses squares that are either clear or blackened to represent ones and zeros. He applied it to Sergeant CJ's new messages. On the far left of this graphic, Dr. Drew's binary translations are in red letters going vertically down the page next to matching binary code, spelling the word imminent. Imminent threat, soon upon Earth's leaders and civilizations. Expose and disband hidden knowledge to all citizens. Same phrase. Hidden knowledge. Disband it to all hidden knowledge, to all citizens. Employ safe and controlled joint study to all minds. Progression imperative for combined survival. Embrace the space vessel threat. 000 journey, 12 in brackets, LY we assume is light year. Ike's, President General Eisenhower was known as Ike. Ike's embedded citizens are ready. AIS, close, evolve, 111111. And where it's incoherent, that's where Sergeant CJ would say, Linda, it is extremely hard to watch these zeros and ones going by while I'm trying to write in a notebook and get it down correctly. He was always apologizing that he said, I can't do it well enough. Royal Emerther, he got those letters. Royal Emerther, warning, expose foreign technology to all, and the implication was for evolutionary advancement needed to prevent takeover, in brackets, the number 3 and an upper apostrophe, not known what it means. In the last paragraph is that all caps word Emerther that was on that website about the Council of Five. And then on February 18th, 2016, Sergeant CJ found that he had added 5 new lines of squares and lines without darkening any of them. And he emailed me, quote, this was fast, meaning it's moving fast, and I was unsure if I drew them down correctly. It felt like it was not meant for me to write them, and I felt weird about it, like it was not clear enough for me. I just did the best I could and figured it was probably all messed up or wrong. They are the only ones that I have had since I sent you the photos of my notebook. I could not darken the boxes and lines because they were moving too fast, and I was having a hard time concentrating. There was much more to this, but I could not keep up concentrating, close quote. So the first thing I did was send just the picture of the squares to Horace Drew, and this is what he sent back. There were 5 clumps of letters in 5 unknown words. He did know that the last word, translated Ki, was in original ancient Sumerian and meant earth. So I sent the 5 words to Professor Joshua Jeffers, PhD, research specialist, Royal Inscriptions of the Neo-Assyrian Period Project, at the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, Babylonian section in Philadelphia, and here is his March 24th, 2016 reply. The first 2 words and the 4th word look to be Akkadian and not Sumerian. The first word could be the god Nabu. But without the cuneiform, it is difficult to say since there is no divine classifier before it. Nabu was one of the three most important gods in Sumeria. Nabu was the keeper of the tablets of destiny that recorded humanity's fate. He was son of Marduk and grandson of Enki Ea of the Anunnaki. Nabu's grandfather Ea is the creator and protector of humanity because Ea created humans out of clay to be worker slaves for the Mesopotamian gods. But the supreme god Enlil was irritated by the noise that humans made, apparently because we are not telepathic and we have to talk out loud all the time. So Enlil wanted to destroy Ea's human slave creation with a devastating flood. But Ea realized what Enlil was up to and got a friend to build an ark so that humanity could escape God Enlil's act of annihilation. Professor Jeffers said the second word, rakbu, would be the noun for rider, R-I-D-E-R, from the verb rakabu, to ride, frequently upon a horse or chariot. The middle word could possibly be the word for the city of Larsa in southern Mesopotamia, written out phonetically. It is nonsensical for Sumerian and Akkadian the way it is written here, and this puzzled the professor. The fourth word, sanu, could be an infinitive of the verb to do again, or a second time, or even to be different or strange. The fifth word, ki, by itself can be Sumerian and would mean earth or land. Now, the way it finally was translated on the phone when I was talking with the professor, I said to him, could it translate in English that the Sumerian Lord God, Nabu, is returning in a chariot to Earth? And the professor said, yes, I think that would be a reasonable translation. Now, let's look at and just go through Sergeant CJ and listen to the full translation. June 30th, 2015, continuous protection of humanity, and we now know that that's Nuremberg, Germany, latitude, longitude. Expose hidden knowledge to all citizens. Advancement imperative for planetary survival. Beware of Orion, 1,350 light years away, and Zeta Reticuli, 39.17 light years away. Avoid sending signals out into space. October 2015 to January 2016. Imminent threat soon upon Earth's leaders and civilizations. Expose and disband hidden knowledge to all citizens. Employ safe and controlled joint study to all minds. Progression imperative for combined survival, and you could add of humanity. Embrace this space vessel there at 000, journey 12 light years. This is the most confusing one. Ike's embedded citizens are ready, and then nobody understands the next two lines, except that it has the word evolve. And then Royal Emerther warning, expose foreign technology to all. Evolutionary advancement needed to prevent takeover.